Yeah, I think there's a lot of it will depend on how teams manage their injury crises. I think so many teams are going through it. Newcastle being another prime example, they're still remaining competitive in their league position. And the game I'll move on to next, Dave, is they're beating Chelsea 4-1 at home, which is always key for Newcastle, isn't it? But I feel like the rotation of Newcastle's squad, the shuffling of their deck, is such a remarkable asset of Eddie Howe and how he gets players into that team and integrated so well. Players you've perhaps never heard of. Young players are literally being thrown into action for the first time, executing the plan really flawlessly almost. Now, I know Chelsea shot themselves in the foot on regular occasions throughout this game and prove what a Jekyll and Hyde side they can be. But let's not take anything away from Newcastle. They're still very much in a European hunt, aren't they?
No doubt, and I thought it was really impressive the way they've actually managed this game. Like you mentioned, obviously Chelsea did make a few mistakes, but that Newcastle front line has shown just how potent they are. And obviously, it's nice to see Isak back in there. He's not played a great deal of minutes recently, and making an impact straight away. But just in the way that they actually played the game, I thought Chelsea struggled with their movement and the space that they really actually utilised behind their defence. I think Chelsea have actually looked quite good defensively so far this season. So I think to do that's quite impressive in itself. But like you mentioned, some of the players that have come in and really imposed themselves on games, like Myles, 17 years of age, is absolutely incredible. He's obviously hailed as a massive talent, and
what a pass for Isak's goal as well.
Oh, brilliant, out of this world. And it's really great to see that kind of talent coming into the league. And obviously there's a few young talents who we'll talk a little bit about, and a few other games this weekend have come in and been able to make a statement. And it's just wonderful to see, because we want to see this young talent getting these opportunities. So for him to come in and take his chance was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, a few standout performances from Newcastle. As I say, Chelsea didn't do themselves many favours, but looking at Newcastle's goals as well, I feel like that's a real testament to how well drilled the team is, how tactically astute the players are when they score goals, how kind of technically good they are. And I say the Isak's goal was great. Miley's pass through to him was superb. They find each other, don't they, quite well? And I think as a team, they look like a really slick unit. No matter who comes in at the minute, they seem to be coached into a system that's working really well.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've talked quite a few times this season about the impact of Anthony Gordon. Yeah. I think we all ummed and ahed over that transfer when it happened in January, that it seemed like a lot of money and we weren't sure whether we were really seeing a player that was at that level yet. And the summer obviously was huge for him. He was instrumental in England's success over the summer. And then he started the season with that same sort of venom, and he's made himself one of the first names on the team sheet. So for him to get a goal in a game like this as well and continue that form, that's excellent. Dave's right in pointing out Isak. I wonder how many strikers are better than Isak in the league right now. If he stays fit and is consistent, Newcastle have got such a good player on their hands there.
Yeah.
And when you're building something, you want those young talents that are a step above everyone else to build everything around, because it's not a quick fix. They've not done the inevitable kind of splash cash Galactico style signings. They've brought in two players that Eddie Howe has worked really closely with, and he's getting the best out of them at an early age, which suggests their ceiling's really, really high. So yeah, huge win for Newcastle. If you think about the scenes in their last game, when Trippier's kind of arguing with the fans about the amount of injuries they've got, and then Chelsea, it looked like they were picking up some momentum from some big results themselves. And they dispatched them really comfortably here. Like, you're right, Chelsea helped them. It's always helpful when you get your captain sent off in quite a silly fashion, and when Thiago Silva realises he's 39. But generally speaking, you've got to give Newcastle all the credit.
Yeah, I think they played brilliantly. And I was going to say, Dave, for Anthony Gordon as well, I think he's a shout for an England start at some point, just to experiment. We've not got many games left before the Euros. And I think Scotland are circling around him as well, and rightly so. He's such a talented player. But I think in his position, England are still a little bit uncertain. Like, it's still up for grabs. There's players that are out of form in that position. Do you think he's got a chance with England? And do you think he's as good as the players that are already playing there for them?
I mean, coincidentally, the two Englishmen that are most in form were both playing in this game, who are playing that sort of inside left or can play, either side. And that's Anthony Gordon and Raheem Sterling, who both, performed excellently of late. And for me, I think they've got to be in with a shout. I don't see how they can't, because especially the players that are in there at the minute, in terms of, we mentioned over the weekend that Jack Grealish has not particularly looked himself of late. Either Rashford, who's been out of sorts for a long, for the best part of the majority of the season. So I don't think you can look past them. I think it's hard to, really. Well, but it's just about when they get that opportunity. I think the strange one for me is that Southgate obviously mentioned about, it's very close to a squad call-up, but I think there's only pretty much one more window before the
Yeah, just in
competition. So
March, I
how do you
think. Yeah.
Can I weigh in and just say one for the socials then, Mike? You're saying Anthony Gordon in for a shout of the England squad. I'm saying Anthony Gordon in for a shout of being Dave's twin brother. Can you ask anyone that's watching? Someone agree with me? Because me and Mike have argued over this. Anthony Gordon is Dave's doppelganger.
I resisted the urge to compare them, to be fair, but do you know what? Sometimes you can see it. You see a young Dave is a spit of Anthony Gordon.
So what are we saying?
I'd take him at the moment. On current form,
Yeah.
I don't see why you can't. And I think there are enough players that are contentious at the moment. Like Rashford's playing on the left still. That's always going to happen. And I don't mind taking Rashford because of his versatility. You could always put him up front if you needed to. But I like Gordon. I think he's really come on a long way under Eddie Howe, and you want players that are that kind of hungry. And he's shown that he's prepared for tournaments over the summer as well. So why not?
I think the one thing that he has got going for him as well is definitely is in intensity, not just on the ball but off it. He's shown that he's willing to be it for the team, and Eddie Howe has really brought him a long way, really, in terms of sort of defensively. He's looked on it for Newcastle this season, and that's definitely an area of his game that's improved.
But Newcastle on their prospects as well. Obviously, before the international break, they lost to Bournemouth, and we were saying how much of a blow that was. There were the scenes at the final whistle where Kieran Trippier was confronting fans, and saying, what do you expect? We've got all these injuries. So it begs the question, really, Myles, if when these players do come back, this team and this squad looks suddenly a level above, doesn't it? And even with those injury problems, they're sitting in 7th place at the minute. And that's a competitive area of the league to be in. There and above, as we've just said, it's really tight. Is there any chance that they could make up that ground now? Or do you think it's that tight and that competitive that losing that momentum and those players has kind of hit them early, and it's probably kind of irreversible?
It's difficult to call. It's definitely not too late. I mean, there's still a lot of the season left, obviously, and it feels inevitable that they'll do a lot in January, particularly to cover the centre midfield. Now, they know that Tonali's out for so long, so it depends on what they try and do after the Christmas break, but they've got a really tough sort of round of fixtures coming at the moment. Obviously, they've got the Champions League to contend with and a fixture against PSG midweek, and I don't know whether they would benefit from not having to worry about the league a little bit. If they could continue a run in the Champions League, that would be everything for them. And if they came 6th this season, which is very realistic, but got to the quarters or the semis of the Champions League, would you take that as a Newcastle fan?
Of course you would, yeah. I mean, that's a sign of progress for aspirations of a club like this, isn't it? I think if you can get momentum in the Champions League and raise your profile and get that all-important kind of revenue stream coming in, I think that makes all the difference for a growing club.
What does that mean if you don't qualify the next season, though? Is it kind of pointless? Like, when it was like Leicester, that was different because you never really saw Leicester cementing their place in the top 4. They just wanted a good run in the Champions League. When you're Newcastle and you've got aspirations of being there consistently, well, you've qualified once now, you've got to qualify again. Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. I've said from the start, I think that squad is too thin to compete with both. And I think we will see that. I think we've seen signs of it so far this season. It's harsh on them because I think they're an excellently coached side. But without big investment in January, it's one or the other. And I have a feeling that they'll get out of that Champions League group. And then all of a sudden, the league will take a bit of a back burner.